Okay, so for attendance, you don't need to worry. Just leave your attendance at the inside the chat box. If you haven't yet already registered, okay, it's fine. This is just the last class. Right. So, for this lecture, what we'll be covering is just the essential stuff for the final exam, right? So one of the things that we'll cover is the final exam logistics. Okay, what is the format, the duration, the marks, the breakdown, and uh, what are the full semester topic recap. Okay, I'll just go through one by one very briefly. Okay, you all need to do the reading by yourself and the revision by yourself, of course. So, what is the one big idea from every week, from week 1 through week 14? Right, just a refresher, right? And then the topic by topic revision priorities. Okay, so for the exam, which topic you should focus on more? It's not that uh, the if I say that it's going to be high priority, it doesn't mean that the rest is not going to be uh, in the exam. It will be, but probably with lesser intensity, right? And then you have we also have the answering tips, a few answering tips and tricks. I don't think it's going to be that alien to you. Okay, so basically what I'll cover is how marks are actually awarded by question type and this, okay, or what are the efforts convert into a mark. Then before you go, a few stuff I will remind you as well um, regarding the outstanding submissions and how to reach the teaching instructor before the exam day. I will cover that. You can always contact your teaching instructor, your lecturer, through email or you have his or her WhatsApp, right? So these are the things that I will cover today, all right? So if you have any questions later on, you may raise after I have gone through the slides, right? Okay. So the first thing that I want to cover is the paper itself, the paper at a glance, right? So now what you are seeing at the moment is the cover of the paper, partially. So you won't know what is the content, but I will just go through with you. How long is it? So the duration will be 2 hours, okay? No more, no less. Um, and then it will have 4 questions, okay? Although it's 4 questions, there will be sub-questions within those 4 questions, right? It is a structured question, no MCQ. So you have to be really prepared. Please go through the reading materials and also the lab exercises. The total marks, of course, will be 100, but you have 2 sections, Section A and Section B. Section A will be 30 marks, Section B will be 70. Section A will basically cover your knowledge on distributed application development, which means it will probably ask you, okay, what is the definition of this? How do you identify this? How do you okay, what is the difference between this and that? Okay, so I assume that is the nature of the question. But then in section B, it is more of a practical approach. It will give you scenarios for you to answer the questions and then give your feedbacks based on certain roles. So basically, it's where you apply your knowledge of distributed application development into a scenario, right? And also, this is where, of course, you do the implementation, meaning the programming source code, right? But you don't have to worry so much, the programming part, as long as you have gone through and you have memorized certain parts of the implementation, it should be fine, right? Of course, with the practice of the final exam, it's always going to be bilingual. There's going to be bahasa Melayu and also an English version. So if you prefer the English version, you just go through the paper and then go to the English version, which is normally located at the back uh, of the exam question, right? So upon opening the paper exam, the first thing you see is the Bahasa Melayu version, right? Okay, right. So for every question that is provided and inside this exam, this final exam, it will be a structured question, right? So there will be no multiple choice question in this paper. So that means revision time is best spent practicing full explanations and complete code blocks. It's not about recognizing the right option among four, or in other words, it's not about MCQ anymore, right? So at, at this point, we're going through the topic by topic, the revision priorities, right? All right, so I'm giving you this, okay? So the topic area that you should concentrate on is given by the emphasis there, the emphasis column, uh, right? So the topic area for service-oriented architecture concepts, which is during week 3, you should pay high attention or put high emphasis. Also, in terms of client-server roles and layered architecture, you should also pay high emphasis in that as well. But for data architecture strategies, you can pay moderate attention. But for REST API, you should pay extreme attention, right? For SOAP, you can give lesser attention. For TCP characteristics and the client-server connection process, this is very, very important. And then how you write a complete Java socket program is also important. These are related, right? And then finally, when it comes to virtualization concepts and also the microservices, which is through the several weeks at the end, you can pay those moderate attention. Not to say that they are not important, but you have to get to know the concepts very well, right? Okay. Because even though it's actually moderate, you actually have to know them as well in order for you to answer the scenario questions. Right? Okay. So what we have gone throughout the semester, right? So the first 3 weeks, what we have covered is simply the foundations of distributed application development in terms of the systems, the patterns, and the SOA or service-oriented architecture. If you remember during the first week, uh, there is this term which I have called this is actually taken from the reading resources, the 8 policies of distributed computing, right? In terms of the network, whether it's reliable, instant-free, or secure or static, right? So find out again, read this back again from the reading material, and because this will actually help in you answering one of the scenario exam question. All right. So what would happen if you actually violate one of them, right? So in terms of this, what you should know is what is meant by these 8 policies of distributed computing. That's one. As we move on to week 2, okay, so you remember in week 2, we touched on what are the architectural patterns under the distributed application development. I think this is where you did the lab assessment, right? Where you have to answer all those questions, right? So go through that again, okay, and see and have a clear set of mind and distinguish what is client server architecture, right? So in this case, the server is the named always on site, right? So client is server is always on, but the client is the one that will know where to look for the server, right? In terms of layered architecture, you need to know what are the differences between presentation, application, and data. How do these separate in terms of the concern, right? Okay. In week 3 is where we covered the service-oriented architecture, right? So this, what you basically need to know is what are the characteristics of a service-oriented architecture? How is a loosely coupled is loosely coupled? How is an interoperable is interoperable? And how is reusable is reusable? Huh? Um, and then in terms of the implementation, especially, you have to know what is or how do you implement the status code design. For example, why do we have a status code of 200 something, right? So what do they basically mean? Why is it 300? Why is it 400? Right? So 400, we know that it is basically because of a client-based error. If it's 500 something, then it's basically based from the server, right? The error is from the server. If it's a successful task, then it's going to be 200 something, right? So 200 something is basically reserved for successful uh, exchange of message, right? So it means that the exchange is successful. The message exchange is successful, right? Okay, and then the controller to service to model flow, right? You go through the lab again, right? And see how they are being implemented. And then as we go to week 4, this is where we touched on multi-threading, all right? Also very important. You need to know what is the difference between the concurrency and parallelism, right? And the race condition, uh, the race condition that will happen when we have concurrency and parallelism implemented, right? So how do we fix it? Okay, in Java, we have the synchronized keyword, and also there's a class called reentrant lock, right? Uh, I'm not sure. I don't remember about this, but yes, go through this, the multi-threading. It is particularly important, especially when you want to write the server part. Huh? So determine which thread type is right, whether it's fixed, cached, or single, or scheduled, right? Then week 5 is where we covered the data architecture. How do we actually distribute the data throughout the distributed application development? And there are 3 way services own data. The one is shared DB. We have database per service, and then event sourcing, right? So we need to know each of them, right? What they mean and how they are implemented, right? Uh, all right. Okay, so which one which you would use it when you want to actually trace a certain event trace, right? So this is very important as well. And then when it comes to week 6, right? In terms of building the interoperable web services, this is covered during week 6 till 7. And we did this implementation on Spring Boot, right? So all you have to do is go back to in the lab and see um, the annotations being used under the Spring Boot implementation, right? What does REST controller imply, or when do you actually use REST controller? When do you use request mapping / get mapping or post mapping? Okay, why do they map to, how do you map it to the URL and verb, right? Path variable, right? How do you include parameters inside the URL, right? So how do you do that? All this are included under the reading material and also the lab manual, right? Uh, So you need to know which annotation does which job exactly, right? And also in the exam, when you implement your source code, you also need to know exactly this, right? Okay. Then web service, this is in terms of SOAP, right? So this one is the moderate emphasis being point, although it is moderate, it doesn't mean that it is not important. You still need to go through it. So the same thing, we have annotations in terms of okay, how do you define the service in JAXWS? How do you expose the operation? How do you provide the parameters? And how do you publish the service to to an external system or service, right? Okay. And then okay, this is another uh, another part where weeks 8 to 10 is covered, where weeks 8 and 10 is concerned. This is where you did your socket programming with TCP and also UDP, right? So what is important for this topic area is you need to know the process when you do a TCP connection, right? Especially when you write the program. So how does the server create a socket and how does it wait for a client to access that socket? And then after establishing a TCP three-way connection, how do they exchange data through the input-output streams, right? So all this you have done during your lab session. And then you also need to know why do we use TCP in certain cases and why do we not use TCP in other cases, right? So what is the uh, normal, uh, how do you say, the normal partner for TCP is, the other one is UDP, right? So UDP, why do we not use UDP in a for web browsing, for example? Why do we not use that? Why do we depend on TCP instead, right? Because HTTP is riding on TCP. So a TCP is a reliable, ordered, and connection-oriented um, network service, right? Or protocol. It is ideal wherever data integrity and exact sequence matter more than raw speed. So the trade-off is that if you want reliability, it will add more overhead. But if you do not want latency, if you do not, if you want to decrease latency, you should use UDP, right? Why? Because UDP is uh, as a much, okay, the mechanism used by UDP has a lesser hassle when you transfer data rather than TCP, okay? All right, so because you in UDP, you do not have any checksum for every packet, but in TCP, yes, you have. Therefore, the reliability in TCP is much more higher than in UDP. All right. Okay, the other thing that you should look into is the code shape. Okay, you should be able to write a complete client server socket program from memory. So how a server listens and accepts a connection, how a client opens one, and how both sides exchange data through the stream classes from lab 9 and 10, right? This is if you're under my class, right? Um, so uh, I think Dr. Aris also use. All right, Dr. Emma. I've also shared with Dr. Emma the all this lab. So if that doesn't feel automatic yet, so you have to go through them. Right? If this will help you during the exam. And then finally, when it comes to virtualization, containers, and microservices, which are covered during the last 3 weeks, right? Week 12, 13, and 14. What you should know is what is the benefit of a virtualization? right? So we have here environment consistency, rapid provisioning, isolated sandboxing, efficient resource use, cost reduction, and reproducibility via snapshots, right? And then it should be able to explain, okay? You should be able to explain each one in a sentence with a reason why it matters, right? So for each point, you need to know why. Okay, why it has environment consistency? Why does it have um, rapid provisioning, right? Why does it allow sandboxing, right? So all this you need to have it at least in your mind. Okay, for the time being. Okay, and then the next thing that you should be looking at is the comparison between a virtual machine versus a container. So an example of a container that we have covered in the lab is the what was that? Docker, Docker. So know the differences, right? For VM, you usually use a full OS, strong isolation, boots in minutes. It is very heavy. But if you use a container, it shares the host kernel. Uh, the okay, what is kernel? A kernel is the processing unit, right? Process level isolation, then it starts in seconds. It's very lightweight and portable, almost the opposite of the VM, right? So compared across what? Yeah, what do you have to compare it across what? You have to compare it across isolation, startup, resource use, and portability. I mean, just go through the lab materials, huh? Okay, and then you have microservices and IoT, right? So this is where independent scaling and fault isolation beat a monolith on the spiky load, right? You need to be familiar with the architecture of IoT to cloud shape. How do you design it? How do you implement? If you are required to explain using a diagram, make sure your diagram is labeled. Okay. This spell scanning. All right. So I think that's it for the topics covered, right? Now, what you have to do is you have to go and read them. Reading materials, right? It's up to you. What is your strategy? Okay, now we come to the answering tips and tricks. Nothing new or not okay, nothing rocket science here. So the mark allocation will actually tell you how much to write. Okay, so before you write a single word, all right. So let's say 1 mark. If the question is 1 mark, that normally means that it is a one clean keyword or one short complete idea. Don't write a paragraph for a 1 mark blank, and don't write one word for a 7 mark essay question, right? Definitely not. And then what if you encounter in the instructions that it requires 2 or 3 things, right? So that means exactly that many distinct points. So if it asks you for 2 points, please give 2 points. But to be safe, I recommend you put three at this. And then remember, um, if it asks for examples, then you need to support with examples. Okay. So 5 vague reasons score the same as 2 precise ones. Stop once you've hit the number asked. And then when it comes to comparison questions, okay, this will normally ask you to contrast 2 technologies or approaches only. Um, okay, so the marks will only be awarded if you give supporting detail to both sides. Let's say you compare technologies in terms of what? Reliability. So when you have to compare in terms of reliability, make sure you give the example for both, right? Not just one of them. All right? Okay. So naming a feature alone with no description will earn you nothing, right? Uh, okay. So when a question gives you code to complete, okay, so what do you do when you are faced with code completion questions? Okay, so these are scored per blank, and exactness beats elegance. So the precise annotation, class, or keyword the framework expects earns the mark, not a creative rewrite. So that means, let's say in that question, you need to fill in the blanks and it is asking you for a specific keyword from a specific programming language. Okay. So you have to give the exact keyword, right? Not something creatively uh, made up from your head. Okay. You do not create your own language in this case. So again, go back through the labs exercises, okay? Look at the Spring Boot implementation in terms of the REST API, the Java API, XML-based implementation, right, for SOAP. Um, and then partial completion may still earn most of the marks, right? Filling in most of the blanks correctly will be leaving the question blank or restructuring the whole method your own way, right? So if you're given a fill in the blank question, do not rewrite the method, just fill in the blanks, okay? Um, Even if you don't know, let's say you don't know, right? You still try to attempt to fill in the blanks rather than leave it blank. Uh, Rather than leaving it empty, it's best to fill it in with something. Right? Who knows? Maybe uh, you would actually gain some marks even if it not if it isn't full. Huh? Okay. Read the surrounding code for clues before you guess. Right. So sometimes, not sometimes, all the times, they give you clue. A partial code, right? So in that partial code, they may also include other variables. So just be sure that you don't miss out on any other variables within the in the source code, and look at the method signature, the return type, and whatever is already written. So the answer is often hiding in what's already on the page. Okay, sometimes you might be needed to include you may have to include the variables that are already there, right? But it depends. Okay, when it comes to a socket programming question, so this is what is expected. You need to know the standard building blocks code. So what does it mean by code? That means you need to know the implementation by heart. So how a server listens for and accepts a connection, and how a client opens one, and how both sides exchange data. You need to know that. You need to know how to implement those. And then do not forget to implement proper exception handling, right? That is also very important. And an incomplete but correctly structured attempt earns far more than a blank page or pseudocode, right? So guys, please, even if you cannot remember anything, at least try to attempt the question. Don't leave it blank. Huh? So what you can do is you just write the lines you're confident about first, then fill in the rest. Huh? Okay. So how do you attempt a scenario-based question? Right? So what are the tips here? Uh, Always when you approach a scenario-based question, when you have a point, you explain the why, okay, because, and then you tie it to the scenario that is given to you, right? Do not give a generic textbook statement, okay? And please tie it to please tie the answer to the scenario. All right. Okay. And then if a question asks for a diagram, label every arrow with what's actually flowing along it and show a clear direction between components. Unlabeled boxes rarely earn full marks, so no matter how complete the diagram looks otherwise. Next, when the question says identify and explain, treat that as two separately marked tasks, right? Naming something is rarely worth as much as explaining something. Okay, so when you are asked to explain something, make sure you explain it very well. Specifically, you have to explain it so that it fits the scenario. So don't stop after mentioning a point, right? Or after mentioning a name. Uh, okay, right. So that's it. Okay. And then exam day strategy. Okay. Okay, this is a strategy that you can use when you try to answer. Since you're given about 2 hours to answer all four questions, you are required to spend about 1.2 minutes per month, right? Because you have to about 2 hours. So skim the whole paper first so you know how to pace yourself and budget extra time for any sub-question that asks for complete code rather than a short explanation. So depending on how prepared you are, take those question longer than the okay. So depending on how prepared you are, please spend the time accordingly, right? Um, and then attempt every part. Please attempt every part, even if you forget or something. Don't leave it blank. So partial answers across every question beat a perfect prosa, and a question left entirely blank. So every question has some easy marks, right? Try to identify those. Okay, do the ones that you know first, and then go back again and fill in the rest. Do not leave any question blank. And then when you read the questions, underline the command words, right? For example, define, explain, justify, identify, so that you know exactly what is expected from your answer, right? Okay. All right. Just before you go, we've reached the end of the presentation. Just a reminder. Just check your ULearn, the marks. Later on. I think for my section, I think I still need to go through your lab assessment, right? Right. And just cross-reference with the ones on SMP, yeah, so that they match. If you think you somehow deserve more marks or something, you can always send an email to us, right? So this is the last formal class. Any further questions or on contents, marks, or submissions to go through email before the exam date? Okay. Uh, you may ask through informal channels like WhatsApp. Uh, but for other lectures, I am unsure. Final exam logistics. All right. So I think you know already when, where the exam is. It is on 11th of July on Saturday morning from 9 a.m. until 11. It's 2 hours exam. Located at Bilik Kuliah FPTT 9 to 12. Campus Teknologi. Do not come to the main campus. Right. So you need to be ready with your own transport. Right. How to get there in the morning. Okay. Just be ready for that. Um, all right. Okay. With that, I end the uh, session. Okay, if there are no questions, I would like to convey my heartiest uh, congratulations to you all for finishing the course. But please do your own revision and all the best for your final examination from all of us, the lecturers of distributed application development, right? So Dr. Emma, Dr. Aris, and me myself. Okay, thank you everyone. Any questions?
No, so far.
Okay. All right, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Did Was the music background going on just now?